it's Glenda. I got a big one tonight. This is one that's going to take several episodes. And at the beginning of this video, I'm going to put some pictures to give you some idea of of the different things that took place or that were used. And I am going to be doing, it's going to be Halloween. It's going to be a Halloween thing, but it's going to be a historic one. We used to have, when, here in the United States, way back, back in like the 19th century, like the 1800s and stuff, they didn't have roads like we have. They didn't have, if you went past a certain point, there were no bridges and that kind of thing. But people would carry, I mean, there would be what is called a covered wagon. I'll have one at the beginning. And they would live in that for the whole time that they were on the Oregon Trail. And we don't live too far from places where there are signs that commemorate the Oregon Trail or say this is part of the Oregon Trail. I think there were probably more than one area, you know, more than one particular spot, but they would be close together. So a lot of them, these covered wagons, they were pulled by either a team of horses or oxen. Now, oxen they look like cows, but they are not cows. They are bigger and very strong. And horses, generally they had softer rigging. They used more wooden rigging on the necks of the oxen, where on the horses it was more of a kind of a collar type thing, but it was rigged together with the next horse. Horses could be sometimes 4 deep, 3 deep, 2 deep, just depended on, you know, how, and they weren't single file. They were generally 2 in each deal. But here's the thing. Almost in every one of these, it took months. And people would get sick, and the trail would just, maybe they got into some kind of herb or something that they thought was good, but some of this stuff I'm guessing. But what I do know is people died along the trail, and they were buried where they died, because they just didn't have cemeteries ready for them to be buried. There's a place called Alco Springs south of here in Kansas. It's not far from where I grew up, but they did find out that there is a woman. They stayed there for a while when she was sick, and then she died. And so there's they don't know exactly where she's buried, but they have a commemorative thing of the history that they found out about this woman. But those kinds of things, because a lot of the times these graves were not marked, or they were barely marked. You see all these crosses and shows and stuff, and I don't know how many of them really used crosses. I would hope a lot of them, but a lot of them were just never marked. So what this is going to do is there are going to be ghosts of those left behind who had died, and they will be following the pioneers in their wagons on their trail and possibly haunting a few. So that is where I'm going to take this. And so it's going to take a lot of episodes. And I'm going to have to figure out exactly how I want to do it. Well, we've always got to start out with the basics. And when you're going across the plains, and that's where we are, you're going to see a lot of grass. You're going to see all kinds of different kinds of grass. Prairie grasses. Back then, we mow most of our yards now. But there are places that have preserved prairie grasses, like the Homestead National Monument. Now, if you aren't from the United States or Canada, either one, then you probably would have to look a little farther back in your history, maybe quite a bit farther back, to find to have records. That's what I'm thinking of. To have records of the kinds. Okay, let me think. In order to have a record or understand what it takes to move people from one place to another to settle somewhere where it's all new to them, you'd have to go back several centuries if you're like Europe or Asia even. But that doesn't mean that you can't find out. Whoever led these pioneers was called the wagon master or captain. And then they would have outriders, which would just be men on horses who hired on, and they would go. Now they could be protection. I mean, they could offer some protection, but they weren't normally, I mean, they weren't especially there to fight Indians. They didn't have nearly as many Indian raids as a lot of the shows, the TV shows, movies. Now I'm going to set this pretty much in our area here, because that's what I know. I can give you some information about beyond here, like in the mountains and that kind of stuff. Just like I look up information, do some research for the history that I pass on to you. But as far as placement, most of that I'm gonna make it on our own area here, because it's the plains, it's the prairie, and it's what I know. Now, there were settlements. By the time I'm doing this one, there were settlements. Places where they could stop and they could restock. You know, maybe restock their flowers so it wouldn't be, so they could get rid of the ones that were full of bugs. was a ferry that they could ride across. Earlier ones, when it came to rivers, not creeks, I don't think they used to, they just drove through the creeks. Now, horses can swim. Cattle can swim. About every animal can swim. People aren't so good at it until they learn how. But wagons, if they don't float, you're in trouble. Thank goodness they got to the point where they were able to make those ferries to take things across. Now, a ferry, for those of you who don't understand that would be, it'd be like a big old raft, bunch of logs or something all tied together or put together, and there'd be maybe a couple of rails on there, and there'd be a rope and a ferryman. And it would go back and forth, pulling on that rope, back and forth across the river. Frame under there. And they had wooden wheels. Those wheels were pretty big. They didn't ride in comfort, I can tell you that much. They did have metal. I'm pretty sure it was metal. They might have been wooden, but they had these, what they called, I think they called them stays. I'm not sure. But they had these things like this that would go all the way back through there to keep that rounded part of that cover and keep it, keep it up and braced. So they'd have their feet here. And then the horses, I'm going to wait till this dries and I'm going to paint over it and then do some better legs. Now sometimes they used mules, or like I said, ox. So there would be graves, maybe down over here. This would be quite a ways back, and this might be a grave here. Maybe for an adult or a small child. People would get sick along the way. A lot of times just mosquitoes would carry all kinds of stuff. You never knew. So, but generally, I think generally they learned who was buried in some area. They would go by maybe, I'll go ahead and do the cross, but a lot of times they probably went by a journal. Maybe somebody wrote a journal that so-and-so was buried in this place or that place near this particular rock or that particular stream or whatever. We will do one ghost. This poor guy, he doesn't know he's dead. He's hollering for him, come back and get me. Okay, we do have a ghost. That makes it a ghost story. We will be back again tomorrow, and I guess I could look at you. Okay, that's where we're going. We're going across the prairie, and they're going to find a place where they're going to stop and build their homestead. They may do it on the prairie, or they may go all the way to Oregon, but a lot of people who traveled the Oregon Trail didn't mean that they were going to go all the way to Oregon. A lot of them branched off and went into Kansas and Nebraska, Kansas, Minnesota, Wyoming. So there were places that they could. I mean, when the country was very, very young, before it was even the United States, there were people who would just go. They'd done their exploring or whatever. They didn't like a lot of people around, and so they'd just move on and go on. They what they called the mountain men, which there still are people that call themselves mountain men today, although they do live in houses and have stuff. But there were plenty of people who just liked to be out in the wild, and who would come back and maybe they would be a trail or a wagon master or an outrider or something, or they would have marked by their own horse, and I don't know, maybe they had a wagon of some kind, but their own horse hooves. They would follow a path, like up in the mountains. You had to go through a pass, which was like a place that was you could get through. You didn't have to go straight up a mountain. You could go through a pass, what they called a pass. So I'm going to quit because I am just going on, and there's going to be a lot. So I love you. Take care of yourselves, and please come back. Good night. Smile and wave, there's yours.